I'm Abriel Millett for BYU-Idaho Radio, and today I'm here on the phone with Nate Poffino, who's the Court Communications Manager for Idaho Judicial Branch. And this is about the Idaho Supreme Court visit that's happening on June 10th. But before we get into kind of what to expect about that court visit, can you let our audience know a little bit about yourself so they can get to know you and your role in this visit or what your expertise are?
Sure. As the communications manager for the state court system, um, I, I'm our lead person explaining, how our courts work, talking to reporters like yourself, helping coordinate communications across the court system. And I also do a lot on civic education, teaching about why we have courts. Um, why our system is set up the way it is, helping people understand how to access it, how to get records, stuff like that.
Well, that's awesome. I think like you said, it is something important for us to understand our court systems and kind of how they work, and that's nice that you're able to help people understand that system better and to provide them with more details that can help them with their needs. When it comes to the Idaho Supreme Court, this is something that when I spoke to you before, you guys do these visits around the state. Is that, I guess, tell me a little bit more about, I guess why Idaho does that or what that helps with.
The Idaho Supreme Court, highest court in the state court system. So these are your courts and your county courthouses. They hear appeals from those courts. They are actually required by our state constitution to travel around and hold hearings in other parts of the state. And so this is pretty common several times throughout the year. They'll be traveling. They've gone to various other places over time. We find it a really valuable way to again bring the concept of the reason we have courts to people. Anybody can go sit in on a Supreme Court hearing. We stream them from Boise online with the help of Idaho Public Television when they are held here. So it's easy to go watch the Supreme Court and understand what it's doing and understand the cases it's following. But being able to go and see that in person and actually sit through a hearing, not just watching it on the screen, um, really kind of helps make this level of court more accessible to Idahoans, and hopefully helps them understand a little piece of why we have these things. Courts are really here to, it's a way to resolve disputes, right? This is the alternative to, a king or some sort of official just kind of making decisions based on whatever. This is an unbiased, independent way to resolve our disputes as a society. What the Supreme Court does, it doesn't hear things like a trial court does, where there's evidence, there's witnesses, there's a jury. A Supreme Court is really revisiting, did the court that originally heard this case, did they do it the right way? Did things operate as they should have? Was the law followed? And so they will hear cases in a much different way, but it's a way that highlights essentially the rules of law involved. The rule of law being we all follow the same law. The same law applies to each of us equally as a society, right? These appeals are all based around some specific rule of law that people think wasn't followed, and revisiting how the case was done originally and if there was an error or if there wasn't. And there's certainly a number of times that the Supreme Court says no, this was done properly, and there are some times when the Supreme Court says no, there was an issue, and perhaps it requires some sort of correction.
Yeah, and when that happens, when they revisit and uh, they feel like the law wasn't exactly followed, what's the next step that happens in that case?
Well, let me maybe because it might be helpful to talk about the process
Yeah.
as a whole.
Okay.
Um, so again, we have courts throughout Idaho counties. Each county has a courthouse. Each of those courthouses has judges who they're hearing criminal charges, they are hearing business disputes, they're hearing family cases, they're handling probate when people pass away. We have certain other entities in the state. The Supreme Court will hear, for example, if there is a workplace accident or somebody is injured on the job, and they have their workers, there's a workers' compensation claim, and there's a state commission that handles those. Appeals out of that commission go to the Supreme Court. So we have all these places around the state where disputes are being managed, decisions are being made. Once one of those, say there's a criminal case, there's charges, they go through a trial, person is found guilty. Um, that person has a certain amount of time to decide whether to appeal if they feel that something wasn't done properly throughout the case. Um, Idaho is neat in that a lot of people think of Supreme Courts, of court appeals, in the sense of, say, the U.S. Supreme Court, where they only pick a certain number of appeals to hear. Um, the way Idaho is set up in our state courts, essentially, as long as your appeal follows the rules, like you filed it properly, it's within the right time period, etc., you will get some sort of resolution one way or another. We have a Supreme Court and we have a Court of Appeals that the Supreme Court assigns some cases to. And some appeals are very simple. It's as simple as, I don't like the sentence that this judge gave me for my criminal conviction, and one of the courts looks at it real briefly and says, "Hey, no, this followed the rules." And some of them are much more complicated, but all of them will get some sort of answer if you file an appeal. So an appeal is filed. They have to spend some time gathering essentially the record of what originally happened in the case, because otherwise the Supreme Court doesn't, the Supreme Court needs the information to be able to make a decision on whether something didn't happen right. So there's some time spent understanding what happened in the original case and gathering that information. Then both sides have a chance to file some written arguments. The person appealing is usually, the arguments are here. Here is why we feel something wasn't done right. Usually the person responding tends to argue that things were done properly and the appeal, doesn't need to go anywhere. And then after that, the Supreme Court will schedule hearings where both sides get to argue the merits of this appeal. They're not running the whole case again. They are focusing specifically on areas of the law, court rules, constitutional rights, et cetera, and so on, and whether those were followed properly. This is what's going to happen on Wednesday, is these hearings. There will be 3 cases heard. One of them is an appeal of a domestic battery case. One of them is related to somebody's estate and the timeliness of a lawsuit that was filed about that. And I believe one of them is a case involving costs paid for copies of certain court records. The arguments will last about an hour. Each side gets about 30 minutes each to address the court, to really try and highlight the areas that they think the justices need to hear about. The justices will often ask questions to try and understand the arguments better and the areas of law better that are being highlighted. Basically understand how the parties are asking them to interpret things. Once these hearings are done, the court then turns to deciding how the case will turn out. Again, based on the arguments, based on based on everything written and in person that has been brought to them. They will look at the law. They will decide if things were appropriately followed or not. And then they will write an opinion. And this takes some time to do properly. It's very thoughtfully and carefully done because this court, again, is Idaho's highest state court. Their opinions, their decisions, essentially set how Idaho interprets the rule of law on certain things. So if they make a decision, again, say on this, we have this question about the estate case. If they make a decision on that, that clarifies the law around that issue, it'll apply to other cases as well. It'll be this is the way the law works in Idaho. The court doesn't create law. It doesn't substitute law for its own opinion. It looks at the laws as they are created and determines how they apply to the issue that is before them. So there won't be any decisions announced after these hearings. Those will come later. But we do share those all on the Supreme Court's website when they're available. We also have links on the Supreme Court website for an email newsletter where you can get new opinions. And so if you want to see what ends up happening from any hearings you sit through this week, you can sign up for that newsletter and watch for them to come out.
Can you remind me again, like the website where you can find like the court cases and things like that?
It's isc.idaho.gov. We also have summaries of the cases that will be heard this week on a calendar on that site, so you can go read through them ahead of time.
That's something that I feel like I would encourage students or any of the public who will, like you said, go to see this in person. That's something that's definitely going to help give them background knowledge and kind of fully understand better the arguments if they've already have like an idea of what is going to be talked about.
This is our civilized. This is the way the founding fathers came up with to, in a civilized way, address disputes, resolve things in an independent, impartial fashion. So it's used broadly across society. I think anybody getting a better understanding of how these things work, it will help if you ever happen to need to appear in court for some reason. The people who come to our courts often they are having one of the more complex times of their life, right? They're charged with a crime, or they're trying to get something of serious personal significance to themselves addressed, or they are called in for jury service. They are focused on those things at the time. Taking the time ahead of time to learn how our courts work and what the process is, and again, why we do all this, helps later in understanding your rights, understanding the process, and understanding why things are set up the way they are.
I think one of the things that I wanted to point out again that you said is that appeals, like if they're filed and they're done right, that something unique, I think, like you said about Idaho, is that there'll be some sort of resolution.
Oh yeah, it's an important system, and again, we really value the educational opportunities that come with these visits. I believe the court at this point is planning, I think, about a half-hour Q&A after its last hearing on Wednesday for students and anyone who are attending to, again, talk more broadly about their work and the rule of law and how all these aspects work. The court, when it's holding these hearings at universities, generally tries to do those sorts of events because, again, we see this as a valuable opportunity to help people not just experience the court system, but be able to better understand it.
Well, like you said before, I think being in person and seeing that definitely adds another element that can really help solidify knowledge rather than just like hear about it, but to see it real time can be something super beneficial for students and for the public and for those attending the Idaho Supreme Court visit. Again, to reiterate, this is June 10th, a Wednesday, and it's in the Manwaring Center at BYU-Idaho in room 387. And this is an Idaho Supreme Court visit. And like Nate said, there's going to be 3 cases and a Q&A. They're planning a Q&A afterwards for 30 minutes, you said?
Yes.
The Idaho courts calendar, they have the exact hearings that will be, or cases that will be taking place.
Yes, there'll be 3. They have some pretty standard hearing times. There'll be one at 8:45, one at 10, one at 11:15. Obviously, those times are a little flexible if something runs long, but that's the schedule, and it's available at isc.idaho.gov, along with information about what each appeal involves, and specifically, kind of the rules of law involved. At reading those summaries, you'll get a sense of perhaps what the arguments will kind of hinge on. So, I think it's good to remind folks that if you go, you are attending an actual court hearing, even if it's not at a courthouse. You still want to show some proper decorum. Yeah, there's no applauding or calling out during the hearing. You want things to be quiet while the proceedings are ongoing. But then afterwards, yes, with the Q&A will be a chance to be a little more interactive with the court.
Yeah, that's good to know. That reminder of this is a real court case, and it's good to be prepared for that and the respect the system and how it is done, and it'll be really good for the students and for the public to be able to stay after for that Q&A and have that more interaction, like you said, to better understand or to ask those questions they might have after experiencing it or seeing it live. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we close?
I think, again, just reiterating how much we enjoy being able to bring these hearings to people throughout the year. And I hope anybody who is interested has the chance to come out and watch the court on Wednesday. We have plenty more resources you can direct your listeners to on that Supreme Court website about how Idaho's courts work, how other pieces of the legal system work. We have lots of information out there for anybody who is interested. But I think especially this sort of year where we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of our country, the right to trial by jury, the independent, impartial court system that we have, these are all very specific things that made America so unique at the time. And now is a excellent time to understand them better, to kind of celebrate that we have this sort of government in place to help with these aspects of society.
The Idaho Supreme Court visit that will be happening on Wednesday, June 10th. This will be exciting, and like Nate has already said, this is something worth attending and to really understand our court systems and see cases in person. So thank you so much for speaking to me on what to expect, and I'm really excited for students and for public to attend this event. Again, this is Abrielle Millett for BYU Idaho Radio, and today I've been here on the phone with Nate Papineau, the Court Communications Manager for Idaho Judicial Court, on the Idaho Supreme Court visit that will be happening on Wednesday, June 10th.
Happy to talk to you.